Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our May webinar. We'll get going in a couple of minutes once we've given people a chance to join. Whilst you're here, it'd be great to say hi to us in the chat. Let us know your organisation that you're working at, where you're joining from in the UK or in the world. And yeah, we'll get going soon. I realised, Social for Good ladies, we're all in very different parts of the world today. So I'm joining from Brighton in the UK. Dome is in Valencia, España, and Arantxa is near Edinburgh in Scotland.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I wonder where it's hottest.
Oh, Valencia is 30 degrees.
Oh, okay. I think you win.
I didn't know it was a competition, but you have had really hard days, so I'm not saying anything.
29 in Brighton. Arantxa, what's it like in Edinburgh?
We're a very nice 20 at the moment where I am, which is
that's yummy.
Well, welcome everyone. Nice to see you guys saying hi in the chat. Just give it another minute or two and we'll get going. So if you want to grab a quick glass of water or a cuppa, feel free.
Oh, Tom at Galapagos Conservation Trust. I'm from Ecuador, Tom. That's lovely. Hello, everyone.
Oh, some nice friendly names. We can't see you in this webinar platform, but nice to see some familiar names anyway. Okay. Well, I think a few people might pop in as we get going, but we only have 45 minutes today, as usual. So I will kick off with kind of introductions and talk about what we're going to do today. So let's get going. So if you don't know who we are and you just randomly saw this webinar pop up, then I'll just introduce us a bit. So my name's Kerry Watkins. This is my colleague Arantxa Asali, and we are from Social for Good. Social for Good is Brighton based. Actually, you can hear now we're everywhere based, including Edinburgh and Valencia, but we're a UK based social media agency, and we work with purpose-driven organisations. So the vast majority of people we work with are charities, and our mission is to empower charities and purpose-driven brands to use social strategically, ethically, and actually make a really positive impact in the world through what they're doing. We do all sorts of work, from strategy projects, audits, training programs, influencer management, as well as managing organic and paid social for some clients. And the webinars that we run normally on the last Monday of every month, but if there's a bank holiday thrown in, like this week, we do it on a Wednesday. These webinars are an opportunity for us to share some real value with people who we may or may not be working with. One of our strategic pillars for 2026 is about community, and we believe in being really generous with our knowledge. So we hope that through these webinars, including the one today, that you're going to get some real value from it. We really hope that the insights and experience that we can share makes a positive difference and makes your job a little bit easier, or your work a little bit more impactful. So that's a little bit about us. The agenda for today and what we're going to cover. Arantxa is going to give you a quick introduction to COPE, our favourite new acronym. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about repurposable content, like how you find it, where you find it, before Arantxa then talks you through how to build a workflow around COPE that's going to be hugely impactful for your work, and then coping with video. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our training program, which is also a kind of community space and where you can get lots of value. And if today is useful, the accelerator might be something that you're interested to learn more about. So you're going to forgive me while I do my little pitch at the end. And then we're going to hear from you. So any comments on what we've talked about, any questions, we should have plenty of time for a Q&A before we wrap up. hope you are all enjoying your lunch. We will get ours later. But yeah, that's it for introduction. So let's kick off with the content for today. So we're going to do a little poll first, as we often do, just to get a sense of the room and see where you're at right now. So we'd love to know, where does most of your content for social come right now? A weird thing with StreamYard polls that we're still getting our head around is you have to write the number in the chat, we believe. It's not as simple as clicking on a poll. So type 1 if most of your social content is built from scratch, 2 if you're repurposing a lot, 3 if it's a mix of the two, or if you're not sure, maybe you're not in the key social team, then it's number 4. Okay, awesome. So most people, it's a mixed bag, which makes a lot of sense. And some people are repurposing big time, which is great. I hope that we can still give you some tips today. But for those people that have put one created from scratch, I think today is going to be super beneficial and save you some time. So, well, thanks for sharing that. I will hand over to my colleague Arantxa to kick us off.
Fab. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks, Carrie, for that introduction. So I'm just going to quickly walk you through what is COPE, since we're using this new acronym and you've signed up to the webinar. It's good to know what it is that we're talking about. So COPE stands for Create Once and Populate Everywhere. And it's going to be a useful principle to have in mind when you're creating content. I like to think of it as both a destination and an origin. So the place where you're hoping to get, where you've populated everywhere, everything that you've created, and sort of a principle in terms of where you're starting to create your social content. Think about how you're planning your social media calendars, how you're reusing the value that you already have in different resources. And yeah, it's just a very useful thing that I've used for a couple of years that hopefully gets you to a place where nothing is lost, is the point of COPE. So it's about strategy and just maybe giving yourself a little break in the future. I think of that as well. Like if I do a little bit of work now, then the me 2 weeks from now is going to have an easier time not worrying about what social content I'm putting out there. But it's very simple, and obviously we'll illustrate all the different aspects that come into a COPE workflow as we move through the webinar today. But hopefully that makes sense. I'll hand over to Carrie to help you do the first thing in terms of working with COPE, which is spotting all the content that can be turned into social. So Carrie, off you go.
Thanks, Arantxa. I'm a big fan of today's Kerry doing things that future Kerry is going to be really grateful for. So the way that I think about repurposing content and finding these opportunities for repurposing content for social that Arantxa is going to talk through more later is I see it as a bit of a treasure map. And I think most organizations are kind of sitting on all this treasure. There's all this gold, it exists there, and it can make great social content, but it's not always obvious where it is. And then you get stuck, because we're all strapped for time, you get stuck in creating content from scratch all the time. And maybe you're repurposing a bit, like some of you said in the poll, but maybe there's still some hidden treasure there that could be useful. And I think, yeah, lots of clients we've worked with, we find that it's very easy to overlook content you've already made in a different format, such as reports that perhaps got sent once and then weren't touched again. Could be a webinar or a live event that you did that had a few people attending live, but then it sits there. Or perhaps a case study or an article on your website that then just kind of disappears chronologically and is kind of lost. So when we think about this treasure map, if you start finding these social content opportunities, you can't unsee it then. So I think this process, if you go through what we're going to recommend today, I think that stays with you. And what I'm going to talk through next is how to find these little pots of gold that haven't been claimed for social yet. But before we do that, we want to do a bit of thinking around what makes repurposable content. So I'm going to talk through 3 things so that when you are doing a quick scan and looking at what you've got, there are 3 questions worth asking to tell you if that's repurposable or not. So the first thing is, does it contain something useful that somebody else would value? That could be a bit of content you find that contains some statistics, a story, perhaps a lesson learned, a how-to, an opinion piece. And I think the theory here is if it was worth making once, then it's worth using it more than once. The second thing is this piece of content that you found just living in one format, but you could easily see how it could be transformed into another format. So a report, for example, could make a really great carousel for LinkedIn or Instagram, or a webinar, such as the one we're doing today, could be cut into shorter clips, or it could be turned into a newsletter, which is what we often do. So I want you to start thinking that format isn't fixed. It's the gold in that content that can live in many different ways. And then the third thing to ask yourself is, does this bit of content that you found reflect your organization's expertise, the kind of work that you do, or your audience's reality? So if it does do any of these things, it has strategic value and it's worthy of being on your social channels. It's already relevant. You don't have to create something else from scratch. If you find a piece of content and it ticks all 3 of these boxes, that's amazing. But I think the one that, for those of you who said you were creating everything from scratch or most things from scratch, it's the second point that's probably the easiest spot and the biggest shift in mindset, is just thinking format is not fixed. Just because something is a blog, a report, a newsletter, a long form video, it can live on social. So that's the whole idea behind COPE. These are the criteria that we'd recommend kind of applying to content when you find it. But next, we want to think about how we actually go and find the stuff. So there are 4 steps. If you know Social for Good and you've heard me do webinars before, you will know we love a framework or a process to follow. It just makes what can be quite an overwhelming space much easier. So I'm going to talk through another process. So where do you start this treasure hunt? Pick one place to start, and I would imagine for most of you that is either your Google Drive or your SharePoint, your website, your newsletter archive, or if you use it, perhaps your YouTube channel. These are going to be the places I think that are going to have most content in there, most value. If this feels like a bit of a mammoth task and a bit of an audit, I think it doesn't need to be something that you just say, right, I need to put a day aside and find all this repurposable content to cope with. Just do it bit by bit. And you will, future you will thank yourself. The next thing is looking back perhaps for just the last 12 months. I think this is a good starting point. You may well have content that you discover that is older than that still holds relevance and is still valuable, particularly some pages on your website, for example. But I think just as a starting point, it's easier to repurpose recent content because the context is still likely to be fresh. Any internal links are probably still working, and it's very likely to reflect where you are as an organization at the moment. So by all means, don't discount anything older than a year old, but recent is probably most useful to you. The third thing is thinking about the value that content could add to others. So if you find something, just ask yourself, if I repurpose this into social content, is it going to be adding value to somebody's experience online? Would they find it useful? Would they find it interesting? Is it relevant to them today? For example, if you have a report that you put together for a funder, can you use some of that information that could serve a new audience? Is there still some useful info there that perhaps could be useful to potential funders? Or if you have a blog post that is just packed with value and insight from the team, could some of that content help others who are perhaps very unlikely to find it on your website anymore? Or a webinar that you ran, so for anybody in our target audience that is not here today, thank you for being here, and you'll be here for the Q&A, but there's hopefully some useful content here that we can then repurpose, some highlights, some top tips that we can then share on our socials to still add value to others. And the final thing is just to flag it, organize it, keep it in one place. I wouldn't start moving things around, obviously, because you're going to have a lot of shared documents. But what I'd suggest is popping this into a spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but a simple spreadsheet with with columns for a list of the content you find, a URL to where it lives, a note on what format it is, and then you could potentially put some initial ideas about how you might want to repurpose that. I don't have one of these, but I can imagine some color coding and drop down joy, but that's just me because I'm a huge spreadsheet geek. But however you want to create it, just think of it as creating something that's kind of simple, shareable, if you will have members of your team helping with it as well. Just like a useful archive. It's like putting all the gold in one place that you found in your treasure hunt before you decide what you're going to do with it. So to summarize those 4 steps, you've got this simple plan for spotting repurposable content. Pick your places, just start with the most obvious one, and then maybe go through those 4 or think if there are any others. Focus on recent content from the past few months. Just sense check if you think it still adds value to others and therefore is still strategic, and then just keep it nice and organized. And you'll have this lovely kind of starting point, a pile of content that you can do great things with and not have to create so much new from scratch. And then Arantxa is shortly going to tell you how to create this workflow to help you work through that. But just before I hand over, your map might look a little bit like this. So I've really gone for it with the treasure map analogy here. I hope you're still with me. 6 pieces of content here that when we were thinking back about all the clients we've worked with, where have we found the most value in terms of content that can be repurposed? So those are, and I hope that some of these inspire you as well to have a look in your organizations. Reports and research, so anything that you've produced that has data, findings, insights, even if it's a one-pager. Blogs and case studies are gold for using the COPE workflow. They're already written for your audience. They're already on your website. So a lot of the work is already done. Internal documents, decks or FAQs. There might be some stuff that nobody really thinks of as social content, but some kind of internal presentations or onboarding documents, some of these could be really valuable, especially around any content you share around culture or recruitment. Landing pages on your website. This is full of copy that's already in your brand voice, lots of key messaging and stories that explains what you do and how you do it and why it matters. And in our experience, you're so close to this that as we are to our own website, that you kind of forget that there's so much gold there that for people who don't know a lot about you could be really great for that awareness content. And we've got events, webinars, recordings. If you've run through things live and recorded them, you've got some great raw material there for clips, for quotes, for carousels. As I mentioned earlier, we repurpose our webinars into 2 different types of newsletters and some social posts because we put a lot of work into building these for you. And a lot of these webinars are actually repurposed from our accelerator training program. So we're kind of saving time all over the place, but still hopefully reaching more people and adding a lot of value. And the other area that you might not think is a great spot for repurposable content are your team socials, those behind the scenes moments or photos, great human content that really, we know that stuff works well on social media. So yeah, maybe you have a bank of videos and images of the team that could be great. Anyway, I hope your treasure maps look something like that when you kick off with your hunt. But I'm going to hand over back to Arantxa now, who's going to talk you through what to do with it.
Fab. Thank you, Carrie. So a lot of good information there in terms of where you're going to start. But now that you've found all of this treasure, we need to know what you're actually going to be doing with it in terms of your COPE workflow. So in terms of building a COPE workflow, you're going to have chosen already one of these resources that Carrie talked about: reports, blogs, events, socials, colleagues' posts, anything like that. And there's going to be 3 steps that you're going to move through in terms of building a COPE workflow. Really simple. The first one is to build a social post. So that sounds kind of obvious, but I'm sure that it's currently something that you're already doing once you have information about an event that's coming up, or a product that you're trying to share with people, or something that you've done, a piece of impact. So once you've chosen that, you're going to create your initial, I like to think about as a pillar post. And the key here, when you build your first post, is that it should be what's extracting the most value from the resource that you've chosen. So a really top tip that I can give you for this is that if it can be a carousel, it should be a carousel, because they're really value and information rich. They can tell a story and they can reach a lot of people across platforms, really only with the exception of Facebook. And I'll talk a little bit about what to do if that's the case. But even if it isn't a carousel, for information dense resources, it might be people focused, meaning your pillar post is team photos with a caption about the experience, or it may be data center, which means it could be a couple of single visuals or one visual with all your data points, or it might just be text and a link. You already know how to build one post, but from there, after you build it, you're going to step 2, which is to stretch it. So in terms of stretching content, you're going to break it down into smaller or other formats that you can then spread across your socials. So what you're probably doing right now is that you're already creating a social media post, and then most likely you're using the same post that you've created to publish across, let's say, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. And that's a great strategy that we use a lot. It definitely works. But this is about how can we take something that we've already made and make it seem incredibly fresh, incredibly new, with very, very little effort. So you're going to stretch that post. And something that helps me think about how to do that is to look at the components of your average social media post. So I have an example here from one of our posts. This is a LinkedIn carousel that we posted not too long ago. So in your most common post, you can probably have a caption, a visual, or maybe a couple of visuals if it was a carousel, and sometimes you'll have a link. So if I look at this and I break it out into its components, your captions that are text-based could have information that you can immediately turn into a post for Blue Sky or for X or for Threads, for example. And your visuals, like that one on the right there, I could literally stretch up, make it taller, and turn it into an Instagram story, because it's still giving me valuable information. If there's a lot of data points in the post, that could be a completely new post on LinkedIn or on Facebook that focuses uniquely on that data point. Or it could be a single image visual, either for Instagram or for Facebook, all taken from this one post that somebody already created in the organization. So we're going to share with you a resource on exactly how to figure out how to do this in a second, but I just want you to start thinking about social media posts, not only as a full picture thing, but also as something that's made out of a lot of components that you can steal from for more content. And then, of course, you're going to publish it. So you're going to schedule it, and you're going to show up consistently. And as probably a lot of you know, consistency is far more important than complexity when you're trying to get into a place where you're posting regularly on social media. So your main post can be posted out, let's say, in the same week across LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And then your stretched posts, because they're evergreen, because you found these resources that are rich in value to your audience, could go out 2 weeks from now or next month. And with a good COPE workflow, it means that you're building content into the future. You're giving yourself or your social team a little bit of a break to focus on the day-to-day things that you do, with a cushion for future content. And you can even get a little bit more granular. So let's look at what this looks like in practice. So say you have an annual report. An annual report is something that a lot of organizations have. They're really rich in statistics and stories and impact. And they come with quotes, they come with human stories. They're a great place to start. From there, I can build, number one in my step, a LinkedIn carousel. It's going to tell a story. It's going to share the data. It's a great place to start. After that, I can stretch it. And I'm going to think, how am I going to stretch this piece of content? Where each slide of that carousel could be a standalone post on Facebook or on Instagram. But the stats that were written in this copy-dense piece of information or reporting resource could be posts for Blue Sky, for Threads, or for X. And if they had a case study in the report, that could be a quote card that you can share also on Instagram or on LinkedIn or on Facebook. And that principle is one that you could repeat over and over until you feel that you've extracted every ounce of value from this piece of content. Then you're going to schedule it across time so that you have a little bit of a cushion, but also so that the content feels fresh and new every time that your audience interacts with it. And from that one section of your impact report, you could have one LinkedIn carousel, 5 to 10 visual posts, 3 to 5 stat-led posts or text-based posts, and maybe 2 to 3 quote cards. And that means that in one session of sitting down to create social media content, you've created this week's worth of content or month's worth of content, depending on how you're scheduling it and what's in it. But obviously, this is the best case scenario, right? Even if you only get 3 posts out of 1, that's still 3 posts that you didn't have before. So this kind of build it, stretch it, publish it structure is really helpful when you're trying to get your content to go further than it usually does. Now, keep an eye out because it's just a little tease. We're going to share you a QR code for this full COPE workflow that helps you decide not only how you can stretch a particular piece of content, but what platform is best for each piece of content and where you can get the most value out of the resources that Carrie already helped you identify as being value rich and useful for your audience. Now we're going to move on to video. Something we talk a lot about with our clients is how hard it is to create video-based content that is kind of taking over all socials when you don't have access to recording your own footage, or when your organization is really pressed for time. Maybe you don't have the materials that you need in order to go out and record a lot of things. It doesn't mean that you can't cope with video, and we're going to walk through what you can do in order to make your content go further, even in the world of video. So the first thing that I will say is when it comes to video is keep it simple. Again, consistency over complexity when you're starting, and keep things dynamic. So keep it moving. Stock footage is king. So stock footage gives your content sort of a dynamic aspect, visual movement, without you needing to really film anything. You can pair it with things like captions that can be your operating principles or a quote for a beneficiary. You can pair it with a voiceover, which is often a lot less scary than having to sit in front of a camera and record yourself speaking. Or you can really make use of in-platform features like trending sounds or trending formats. And sites, there's a lot of sites where you can get stock footage. I would really recommend sites like Pexels or Pixabay. They have a lot of free clips that are ready for you to use. But if you're already using Canva, which I imagine that a lot of people are, Canva has a really good library of stock footage as well that you can use. So keep your production simple, keep your formats repeatable, and just show up consistently. Another thing that you can use that isn't stock, but is kind of tied to it, is B-roll. And the reason that I'm mentioning it is that even if you think, oh, but that's me going out to record content, you're probably already capturing a lot of B-roll. Most people in their daily lives are capturing some kind of video content from either events, from office moments, from project visits, for team day outs, as Carrie was talking about, team socials. You might look into your phone gallery and find that you already have a lot of video content. And it's a shame that we kind of don't know how to use this in order to get the most out of it. So the shift that you need to make in your mind is really small. Start thinking about those clips that you have as content pieces that can be really good for your social media, rather than just capturing moments in your daily life. And the great thing is that you don't really need to change your behavior because you're already likely doing it. Encourage your colleagues to do the same, and you will slowly but surely, as you're relying on stock video, start to build a really good library of real and authentic B-roll that can be supplemented with stock for even better video content. So things you can do. You can add text overlays with your key messages, as I already said. You can use a voiceover explaining the work that you do. You can create highlight reels of an event or a team social, and people love those behind the scenes moments. You can turn a series of clips into a day in the life. And if you go through your COPE principles about stretching, that could even become an Instagram story highlight, for example. You can layer it under beneficiary quote. So all the things that you usually already do for social media content across non-video platforms that you might already be used to doing are great if you add a dynamic element with either stock or B-roll to create, say, a TikTok or an Instagram reel. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how we do this with our clients, because I think that'll just bring it a little bit more to life. So this doesn't have audio, so don't worry if you can't hear anything. So whether you're using stock footage or a library of B-roll, these formats are really useful. The first one that I really recommend is did you knows. As you are likely talking about internally, hooks in video content are really important. You want to capture people's attention immediately. So if you take a data point, a point of insight, or an outcome from your existing content, you let that lead the video. You put text on screen and you find some stock footage or some B-roll that supports the story, and you start with a hook. Something like, did you know that 1 in 4 people in our city don't have access to blank? And then your organization is filling that blank. This example that you saw on screen is from one of our clients who doesn't have a lot of footage. And one of their main concerns is that they tell stories a lot about families and children. Another really great thing about stock footage is that you know that it's safe for you to use and share, even if it features children. Sorry about that. So a POV style video is also really relatable because it puts the viewer in the moment. And it just lets them kind of relate to honestly anything that could be on screen. This person on a walk in this scenario is an OT, an occupational therapist, but it could be somebody in a completely different discipline going on a walk, having totally different thoughts. And what I've done here really is let the stock footage lead. So I've started with stock in order to create the idea, rather than started with the idea and tried to find stock that fits in, which might be a little bit of a flip on how you usually create content, but it's really useful when you don't have a place to start with any native video that you've shot. So yeah, POVs are really useful. They could be something like point of view or POV, you've just adopted a senior dog that needed a home, and find some stock footage of dogs. And I mean, who doesn't love videos of dogs, or it could be POV, you are eating the most delicious X if you had a product, for example, that was food or something like that. Final example. I'm hoping that audio will end. Yes, great. So in this example, memes and trends are really, I can't say how useful they are, especially when it's sounds or trending audios, because you don't have any footage. So in this example, we just used an audio that was trending on TikTok, and then we had a clip for our client. And it's really that simple. A single piece of video footage, which could be stock, which could be B-roll. If you felt adventurous, you could go out and film it. But of course, it's in the context of you not having the ability to do that. And you're just kind of embedding yourself into the way that the platform communicates with its audience. So look for trending audios, look for trending formats, and just add your spin to it there. And you probably already know this, but I would encourage you to kind of sit with that for a second. And then this could also be turned into an Instagram reel. If it was on TikTok or an Instagram story, you could get a static capture of it and turn it into a single visual. You could make a joke about it and put it on Threads, which is all about text. So there's always ways to stretch video, but this is also a really good place to start, as I said, with simplicity rather than with complexity. So now that you know where to find all the hidden gold in your organization and you've seen how to work through your COPE workflow, you can consistently embed these practices into how you create social content. So show up consistently, show up confidently on social with hopefully what will become half of the amount of work that your team or you individually are currently having to go through in order to create fresh content every single day. I think Dome has very kindly already shared I can see the COPE workflow QR code. So if you haven't scanned that already and you do, that workflow on the right is what you'll be able to access. And it'll walk you through literally every format that you might be creating for social media and how to stretch it further, build it, stretch it, and publish it. So we've prepped this really handy resource, which will hope will help you get more out of the value that your organization already has. But with that said, I'm going to pass you on back to Carrie to tell you a little bit more about our super helpful accelerator.
Thanks, Arantxa. And if anybody wants a good example of Arantxa's creativity and using COPE, our Instagram has a brilliant reel on it from our team social that I thought nobody, like, this isn't repurposable, but after our last social, everybody had taken some pictures, some little bits of video, and Arantxa did a really brilliant reel out of it that just made us all laugh. So yeah, very quickly before we go to Q&A, I want to tell you about our accelerator program. It's a training program, it's a community, it's expert consultancy, kind of all wrapped in one. Dome is going to share a link to the landing page in the chat because I'm a little bit conscious of time, but I'm just going to very briefly tell you about it. So it's a 10-week training program that includes 4 live modules. I'd say 13 modules, but I think we've added more. It's been growing over the last couple of years. And basically, it's specifically for charities, and it's to teach you everything you need to know about social media to make a positive impact with your marketing and comms. So we teach everything from channel deep dive, strategy, community building, content pillars, AI, working with ambassadors, anything you could possibly think of. And because we work specifically with charities and purpose-driven brands, we have some amazing collective experience and expertise in the team, and it's been a real joint effort building the accelerator. As well as the training program itself, you get a one-to-one with the person in our team who is the best person to help you with your particular area of interest. There are fortnightly community calls, and this is lifetime access. So once you join the accelerator community, every 2 weeks, you can be popping on a call with Nina or Lucy or myself to talk through anything that's bugging you about social, bouncing ideas, talking about how things are changing. I can talk for ages about it because I'm very passionate about it, as I'm sure you can tell, but I'll let Dome put the link in the chat. So if you want more info, you can head there. But we've got a group who started recently, and I think the next one is September. Dome, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. But there's a few months till we run the next one because of the summer break. Was it 8th of September? Is that right? Yes.
Yes.
Anyway, it's really over to you though now, lovely webinar attendees. Is there anything that you would like to ask Arantxa or I? Any comments on what we've been through? Please do.
Yeah, I have started, I don't know if girls, if you can check in the start side of the chat. I start one question from Amy. Can you see it?
I can. Brilliant. Thank you. So Amy says, how can we use trends when we are a charity and have more hard-hitting content? Would it be good to take a trend and slightly adjust it to meet our needs? Really good question. Arantxa, thoughts?
Yeah, well, Amy, you're already at a really good start there. Absolutely. I think, trends I like to think about them as a suggestion from the platform of what you can be sharing. But obviously, if your organization doesn't match perfectly into the most whimsical or funny or individual use of a trend, then make it fit you. That's the whole point. And I would say trends are not only like memes, you know, there's a lot of trends that are trending audio that you can probably use that isn't even somebody speaking. It might be a song that you can layer under just work that your organization does if it is harder hitting. And that will still be really useful in terms of using the platform's features to kind of help you navigate the algorithm a little bit better. So yeah, make it fit you. Don't feel like you need to adapt your message, because obviously then you kind of lose yourself in the platform.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with the answer, Amy, but I think also it comes down to your content pillars as well. You'll likely have 3 to 6 content pillars in your strategy, and yeah, not all of them are going to be trend friendly, but some of them that are maybe perhaps, I don't know, more behind the scenes, more about you as an organization, there might be opportunities there for some of the kind of the lighter hearted trends that don't feel right for the harder hitting content. I hope that's helpful. Any other questions from anybody? Oh, thanks. Dome's just shared a link to some webinar feedback. We've been running these webinars for a year and a half now, every month, and we really love getting feedback on how useful they are. And if there's anything that I don't know, any topics you want us to cover, like we really want to know this kind of thing to make sure that they're useful to everybody. So please do take a moment to fill in that form. We'd be really, really grateful. Any other burning questions before we go? No?
If you need to sit with it and then come up with a question, feel free to message me on LinkedIn about Cope if the workflow is confusing or you want to test something. Happy to chat through that as well.
We got a new question, sorry, from Emily. Can you see?
Yeah, so we have a steady enough flow of new content, how to balance repurposing old content amongst also promoting new report launches / events. So how do you manage that, Arantxa, with your clients at the moment, balancing repurposing with new and reactive content?
That's a really good question. And something I think is really worth it is having an internal conversation about what the balance of evergreen versus fresh content looks like for you on a regular publishing timeline or period. So something we do with a lot of our clients is that we have sort of a 70-30 approach, where 70% of our content is either one, depending on the kind of client and the platforms that they're on, it's either evergreen content, or 70% is either like fresh and it's about the events that they're running, about the initiatives that they have, the projects that are happening in the moment. And then the 30% is the flip side. So we like to think about it as evergreen or reactive. Reactive may not sound like what you do, but it's just the word that we use. But if you have sort of a standing decision about what that balance looks like, then when you're sitting down to create content, you know how much you need to stretch, let's say, out of your Cope workflow to meet that 30% or that 40% or whatever it looks like for you internally, and how much you need to leave to liberate time for your team to do it. But also, hopefully, if you've done a Cope workflow really well, you have more time for the more reactive pieces of content that you know are coming.
Fantastically timed answer, Arantxa, because that takes us to the end. So thank you so much for everyone that joined us. I really hope it's useful. Please enjoy using the Cope method. And yeah, feel free to connect with Arantxa or I on LinkedIn and ask us anything that pops up. Have a lovely, sunny Wednesday afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.